What's up guys, Manny from Motomillion, and this is our Dia-vel V4. You guys might have seen the video where we picked this bike up from Ducati Miami and I brought it back over here to our shop. Let's get something right first. I'm gonna call it the Dia-vel V4. If you guys have an objection with that pronunciation, go ahead and comment below. I know some people call it the Dia-vel, but that's not even the correct way to pronounce it in Italian. Neither is Dia-vel, but I think Dia-vel is easier to pronounce and it's more correctly related to the Italian way of pronouncing it. Either way, now that's aside, let's go into the details of the Dia-vel V4, guys. I want to quickly give you guys some specs to introduce the bike to you guys, but I'm not going to bore you guys to death. This is based on the Ducati V4 platform that we are used to seeing, the Panigale V4s and the Streetfighters V4s that got announced in 2018, but it's a little bit different. So it is the Granturismo variant of it that we see in the Multistrada V4s, and that makes it a little bit different in terms of the construction of the engine. I believe the only changes are in the head. It doesn't have the Desmo valves that give the Panigale V4 and the Streetfighter V4 the crazy top end power that they have. And this one has a more conventional setup where it makes more power down low and mid-range where this bike will be used. It makes it a little more friendly for ownership, meaning that I'm not talking about oil leaks, guys. It's about servicing, so your Desmo valve service doesn't exist anymore. Your first valve service is at 60,000 kilometers, which is I think roughly 35,000 miles or so, which again, for someone who's gonna put a lot of miles on this bike to do super touring. So the figures for the engine are, it's 168 horsepower and 93 foot-pounds of torque, and the torque peaks at 7,500 RPM, which again, because of the valve train that this bike has, it's lower than the Panigale V4 and the Streetfighter V4. But also it shares the counter-rotating crankshaft, and that plays effect with the dynamics of this bike, the riding dynamics. And let's get into that real quick, because I did take this bike out for a ride from the dealership to here, but also I went on a weekend ride with it. I'm absolutely stunned and shocked about this bike because it looks a little bulky. And I'm gonna say this, I say it for most of the things that we see in person. This bike does not look good at all in the pictures. At first I was like, you know, what's that design? It's not very Ducati-like. But when I saw it in person, everything works out great. The bike is really big in the front, but it curves down to a smaller shape here and it gets bigger in the back. And that 245 rear tire, this is, I think that's one of the defining features of the Dia-vels and the XDiavels that are out there. But the seating position is so narrow between your legs, it feels like a sporty cruiser. It's not a race bike feeling, right? It's a more sportier ride, and it's not a cruiser where you're relaxed, but it's very comfortable. So it sits between, I think, an XDiavel and a Streetfighter V4, which to me is a very happy medium, because the XDiavel's front foot control is kind of unusual seating position. Yes, maybe for a long ride it might make a difference, but that's not why we have these. If you were going to go on a long ride, it's missing a windshield, right? But the foot controls are in the back, and the seating position exactly reminds me of a Streetfighter V4 where you're just leaned forward a little bit, but the seat is so much lower that it's not as aggressive as a Streetfighter V4. I don't know. It's hard to say one or the other, right? Because I would never pick a Streetfighter or this one because they're totally different bikes. But if you want to be more relaxed, but still don't want to give up the sportiness, this Dia-vel V4 is an absolute monster for the streets. And I would probably see using this to go on maybe a cruise towards the Keys from Miami, which is about a 3-hour, very slow paced cruise, because it's like 40 miles an hour or 35 miles an hour of the speed limit. And it works great because the lack of windshield, as I mentioned, kind of makes it not a cruiser to get on the highway, maybe for short stints, but I could see that not being a thing to go from here to California. But if you're gonna do that, go for it. You know, I can't stop you for it. But those are my first impressions and the ride impressions. The bike obviously does need an exhaust. It sounds quite a bit like a V2 engine bike, and I didn't know this. I had brought this up, and I think it's either one of you guys commented on a video or somebody told me in person that Ducati's press release says that it is trying to mimic the sound of a V2 engine. And on my initial ride video where I was riding from the dealer to over here, guys, I said it right away. It sounds like a hypermotor. That's what it reminded me of exactly, which is that V2 engine that I think that's that V2 engine that Ducati is trying to describe, saying that it sounds like it. And I'm going to confess, I did use a launch control already. It's crazy how much stability it has on a launch. And you could literally dump the clutch and the electronics do a lot of the work. And it being so low and long makes it not wanting to wheelie. But again, I had the wheelie control on and everything else on, so it came up just a little bit. But I could see myself getting in trouble at the traffic lights with this thing, because who doesn't want to use launch control these days, right? But overall, I think those are my first impressions of the bike. Another thing that really shocked me was, I have to mention this, is the agility of the bike, because it looks so bulky. So you expect it to be a little bit of a pig when you ride it, but it's totally not that. The bike is on the heavy side. I believe Ducati's figures are, wet weight is around 520 pounds, which is a little heavy if you're used to a Streetfighter V4 and a Panigale V4, but it masks that weight really well. The bike is super agile, and I think the difference that I feel between this bike and an XDiavel is when you brake with an XDiavel, I don't know if it's got more rake or something going on. The bike doesn't feel like it really wants to stop with that front brake. And if you guys have ever ridden a big Harley Davidson, you really have to use the rear brake. So maybe I'm doing something wrong when I'm riding an XDiavel, but this bike actually feels much better on the brakes as well when you're riding it compared to an XDiavel. But in terms of the dynamics of being able to shift the weight around, this is amazing. Maybe it's the rearward foot pegs that it has, but it is a very, very sporty ride. I think at this point, some of you are asking, how did we end up with the Dia-vel V4? So as I mentioned, Jarrett Campisi had really raved on about the Dia-vel V4s, especially ever since he got his Lamborghini Dia-vel. And then I rode Michael Knight's XDiavel that I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. I don't see myself getting one because it's now aged a little bit, but you know, the seed was planted there. But when Jarrett raved on so much about these things, I knew that there had to be something more, because Jarrett was telling me, hey, you know, the XDiavel is not the sporty one, even though it looks sporty. The Dia-vel is actually the more sporty one, and I understood that when I first rode this thing. And be it a Ducati, be it a V4 platform that we're used to with the Streetfighter and the Panigale V4, or maybe it's my age, guys. I'm getting up there in age. Maybe it's midlife crisis, but I don't think this is a midlife crisis vehicle, because it is very sporty. But I think it fits the whole Motomillion image of having something that's, number one, it's exotic, right? Because let's face it, this bike is not cheap, and that's kind of what makes it exotic. Not just because it's red and it's made in Italy, but it is quite a pricey motorcycle. It sits around $31,000, $32,000 after the taxes and all the fees when you go to purchase one of these things. But it's just, I think it's an exciting motorcycle. And for whatever reason, I did jump on it on making the decision of getting one for Motomillion, because I knew that hearing so much and reading so much about it, it's going to be an exciting platform, and we're looking for different avenues of expanding our lineup that we offer to you guys, because obviously this is Motomillion. We didn't buy this bike for it to sit pretty like this. We're going to make it even prettier, and that brings us to our build plans, because all of you guys are probably wondering what we're going to do with it. And if you popped in this channel for the first time, guys, that's what we do. We take amazing bikes and we try to make them even more amazing. And a disclaimer, we try to make it more amazing for the street. We don't really deal with the racetrack stuff, because most of us enjoy these things on the road. So getting into the build plans, we are going to clean up the handlebars, because I think this is just too busy over here. And when we're making this video, there's not a lot of stuff available for this bike. So you're gonna have to bear with us. We do have quite a bit of parts already for it. So we're gonna have our hands busy, and we have so many projects that are going on, be it our SP2 project or M1000RR project, and there might be more stuff coming our way. So you have to stay tuned for that. But first off, we gotta clean up the handlebar area. We gotta make some parts for it, yes, because we do also talk to manufacturers in making parts, or we do commission some of the manufacturers to make some parts for us. And something that's not really available right now is the suspension. We did try to see if the Dia-vel 1260 suspension fits on it. The triples are completely different. We might go as far as making new triples for it, but that's kind of far-fetched. We're gonna wait and see if Öhlins is gonna come up with something for it. Last I spoke to them last week, they don't have anything planned yet, but something might be coming. all the black plastics are going to be carbon fiber, which is expected of us. But I think when we look at the bike, there's just too much black. I do get that Dia-vel is supposed to be a little black because it's more cruiser and that's the style right now. But it's missing something and we haven't really come up with an exact plan yet, so stuff will change around. But I know that there's something about these plastic pieces here and here that, to me, it doesn't speak to be premium, but we'll see what we do. I want to spill the beans. We already have come up with a new set of wheels that we ordered for it. We're going to be running some carbon fiber wheels, and I think we'll be able to change that weight figure quite a bit with the wheels because the wheels are quite heavy, guys, and we'll measure them when we get them. And some of the other quick things are overall clean up the bike with removing the reflectors, and obviously I did break my own rule. I did ride it without a radiator guard. Radiator and oil cooler guards are going to be one of the first things we do. We're going to clean this tail up over here, and a fuel cap will go on. But in the grand scheme of things, we definitely need to make this bike more aesthetically pleasing than it is, because I think it is actually a very pretty bike. I like to look at it, but stuff like this sticks out, so we're going to get rid of those things. And another thing that I really noticed when I'm riding this is the sound. As I mentioned, it sounds like a V2, which is nothing wrong, but it needs a little more of a roar. So we are going to be changing the exhaust, and I will spill the beans again for this because we're going to be running our Termignoni dragster exhaust for this. I've only seen it in pictures. We do have it available, but I haven't started off working on it yet because the bike is completely stock. But we are going to run that dragster exhaust by Termignoni for it. In pictures, it looks a little bulky and it looks a little bit weird, but take a look at this bike. This bike looks a little bulky and a little bit weird, so it might play off. We're going to put it on this bike to give it a little more of a noise, and I'm sure Termi is going to take care of that. But if we see that we're not the biggest fans of it, or we need more power because the Termi is a slip-on, we might opt in for the full Akrapovic exhaust that's available through Ducati for it. But for now, I have faith in the Termi exhaust because unlike the Akrapovic full exhaust that has 4 exits on the side, it has 1 exit, or it has 2 exits on this side and it has 2 exits on that side, which to me is pretty cool. But you know, we'll be the judge when we put it on, because I'm going to stop judging everything by pictures after I saw this bike, because I did judge it quite a bit by the picture and I was like, you know, it's not a good looking bike. And I'm just looking through the bike, and as I look, I could name things that we're going to go, but I really don't want to make this a super long video. But definitely a 520 conversion kit will come along for the bike. And what I want to do to this bike is not take away from the character of it, because it is a rowdy bike, right? So we got to make it louder. It is a super cruiser, so it's sporty. So we try to make it more sportier by bringing the weight down a little bit and adding to the vehicle dynamics. And I think it's a Ducati. It's a great looking bike, so we want to make it a little bit better looking. So you could be looking out for that. And if you guys have any comments or anything that you guys say that we should really do to this bike, or if you see a new product that's out that is very exciting, put them in the comments below, because we kind of want to know too. I do research here and there, but I don't come across everything all the time. So if anybody has any suggestions on what we should do, I really appreciate your comments regarding that. But overall, I think this is a warm welcome for a new bike at Motomillion. I'm not calling the Motomillion Dia-vel V4 yet. It's going to be a Motomillion Dia-vel V4 when we're done with it. But the journey starts here, guys. And if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Until next time, have a good one.